everyone, welcome to month 3 videos. Victoria here with Meg.
Hey everyone.
We're hanging out in my office today, and today's episode and video we're going to talk all about mindset during recovery.
Yeah, it's something that I think really sets the stage for the rest of the conversations that we're gonna have here in the community. It's something that I think is under-addressed a lot of the time in this space, and it can be super foundational for regardless of where you're at moving forward in your recovery, in your process. So yeah, I think it'll be a good conversation today.
Yeah, so we want to go through all the steps of how to become an intuitive eater and the steps to living your life intuitively as well, but we recognize the need to first start with kind of the beginning stages of that, which is making sure your mindset is in a really positive place for growth and for transformation with this process.
Absolutely.
So let's get started. So the first part in the mindset for recovery is step 1, admitting there is a problem. So first and foremost, we want to say we recognize that everyone in the community will probably be in different stages in their own journey. Some of you may have had a past with eating disorders, others of you might have orthorexia or orthorexic tendencies, others may just have a past of yo-yo dieting, disordered eating. There's going to be different categories, and there's a spectrum. So it goes from, a totally healthy relationship with food to kind of dieting and then disordered eating, then we start to begin to delve into eating disorders. You have to be honest with yourself on where you are in your own journey. But what we do want to say is whether or not you're dieting or you've had a past with an eating disorder, no matter what, admitting there's a problem with your relationship with food is truly important, because if we can admit there's a problem, it allows us to then begin to make changes to begin to transform ourselves.
Yeah, and your problem doesn't have to be worse than somebody else's. Like, I think everybody is so caught up in comparing themselves that their relationship with food is just not bad enough. And I think that's where a big barrier to recovery can be. And so your journey, your story, your relationship with food does not have to get to this point to where it's bad enough in order to recognize that there is some disorder there, and you don't have to live that way. So that's definitely something that we want to share with you all and make sure that you all just really internalize and are just really real with yourself. Like, recovery and getting help is possible regardless of where you're at on the spectrum.
Also in step 1, we want to admit there's a problem and literally say it out loud. I think it can really help us own it, and it's not that we're going to make it our identity or become this as like our story, but at least recognizing it and saying it out loud, I think can really allow us to then begin to create change based off of knowing that this is something we need to work on. So whether or not you just say it out loud to yourself, or you talk to your therapist about it, your doctor, your dietitian, a trusted friend or family member, saying it out loud can really own it and then begin to progress forward in your journey to recovery.
All right, and now let's move on to step 2 in the mindset for recovery. And so this step is recognizing that the disordered eating relationship with food is not necessarily about the food and the weight. And typically it's not just about those things. It's actually a symptom of something going on that's much deeper. And I think going into recovery, recognizing this is very important. This is something that I wish I would have done more myself in my process, and I think it would have allowed me to recover and to heal quicker and foster that intuition inside of me quicker as well.
Yeah, I feel very similarly too. So I think for a really long time I blamed food and the weight in my body image was definitely a component of my story. I realized that there was actually a lot more underneath the surface of what that specifically was. So again, recognizing that like this is so much more complex than just like the fixation on food or fixation on our body size, and that there's a lot more underneath the surface there is very important.
Yeah, and it can be really easy during recovery to just harp on these things. Oh, it must be the food that must be addressed and the weight that must be addressed, because that was really what you were focused on during the disorder. So it makes sense in our minds, but the reality is that wanting to focus on these things is actually detaching from our ability to fully heal, because it's not about those things. It goes more back to our feminine energy and our feminine intuition and all the feminine qualities that we possess. It goes back to more fostering those and choosing to not rely on things that are more factual and concrete. So it's really, and this is something we'll talk about more in this next video, it's really about more learning to trust yourself and learning to go back deep into your story and recognizing that there might be some past healing that you have to do, and that's okay. And we'll talk here in a second about how it's okay to deal with past emotions and past hurts and trauma, because those things are gonna come up. But you have to go into recovery knowing that that's gonna happen so that you're prepared when they do.
And while there's no one size fits all to people who have had disordered eating or eating disorders, it's very typical for many of us to not really trust the process, right? And we typically want to control everything, and that's a lot of the avenues in how we get into controlling food and our body size is the controlling aspect, or wanting to perfect things or manipulate and obsess over the outcomes, where, like Mike is saying, the goal here really is to figure out what was going on in the past and heal from that experience, and then learn to guide yourself into learning your true intuition, your female power and energy that you have.
Yes, because a lot of this disordered relationship with food, it stems, I know we keep on saying this, but I want to harp it one more time. It really truly stems from something deeper, and our need and our feeling like we need to control something and fix ourselves. And again, that just goes back to really ultimately feeling deprived in our souls and not being in an environment that fully supports our natural intuition.
So elaborating on step 2, now we're going to talk about step 3, which is feel the feels. So while it's very important in whatever stage you are in your own relationship with food, you definitely need to address the food and the body size, body image issues, of course, right? But we also want to encourage you to do is, like we were talking about in step 2, discover where it's coming from, really get to know yourself, feel the emotions that are involved within this healing process, recognizing that the fixation on food and the body size is a coping mechanism, and we really want to delve deeper into what's going on. It's important to recognize and to address the emotions, and know emotions are a totally normal thing. I think, as we were talking about in step 2, with the masculine and feminine energies, with the masculine energy so strong in today's world, everything's about kind of avoiding your emotions, right? But what we really want to encourage you to do is allow yourself to feel your emotions and really allow them to come up, and just feel whatever is coming up. And I think a very helpful tool in this is journaling it out. You can scream, you can cry, you can laugh, whatever comes up, we really want to encourage you to embrace it.
Yeah, and when we remove our coping mechanism, the biggest one that a lot of us have when we're disordered eaters, which is harping on the food and the weight, when we remove that and start addressing that, of course emotions and feels from the past are going to come up, because we don't have other ways to feel those things or act those out or deal with those in our lives yet. And so that's largely the reason that we turn to food. Of course, this is much more complex, and there's a lot of factors that go into this, and it is different for everyone.
Absolutely.
Everyone. But to some degree, there is this amount of avoiding the emotions and the feels for so long that ultimately led to where we're at right now. And so I also think it's important to differentiate between your different emotions, instead of just noting, oh, I feel poorly, or I feel badly about myself, or whatever. What exactly is this feeling? Are you feeling frustrated? Are you feeling fearful? Are you feeling insecure? Are you feeling angry? All of these things. Are you feeling sad, lonely? I think it's important to hone in on the specific feeling that you're experiencing, this emotion, and then choose how you want to deal with that, to not just deal with it, but to feel it and to work through it. And that's the key here.
Emotions hold clarity and wisdom. So again, emotions are not a bad thing. They teach us about ourselves. They teach us about what's going on in our inner being, and really allow us to fully express ourselves and get to know ourselves on a much deeper level. Last thing to say with feeling the feels is don't attach judgment. Even if you're feeling really negative emotions, don't worry about it. Don't feel like you're a bad person for feeling negative emotions. You're going to have flows of energy and flows of different emotions. That's just normal part of being a human being, but also especially part of being a woman, right? Like, you're gonna have this cyclical flow of your energy and emotions as well.
All right, and now moving on to step number 4, which is applying self-compassion to this entire process. Okay, so I think that this is something that needs to continue to be discussed and talked about, because for a lot of us, we see the disordered eating as a shameful thing, as something that we demonize. And while it's not something that we want in our lives anymore, it's not something that we should also just feel badly about ourselves for. It honestly was there, and it did serve a purpose. It helped you get through some hard times. Again, it's a coping mechanism, and it's something that helped you deal with honestly cope with the world around us and how we are moving through it, but at the same time it no longer serves us anymore, and so we need to make the steps that we can to move forward and to recover and to repair that beautiful relationship that women are supposed to have with food and with our bodies. And looking at recovery and disordered eating through this lens, it kind of helps us practice that glass half full mentality versus the glass half empty. A lot of the times things can seem really down and out when we're moving through recovery, but we want to encourage everyone to just take the optimistic perspective. Like, if you're listening to this video, honestly, you're already making huge strides to recovery and to repairing your relationship with food. So be proud of yourself for that. There's no like doing disordered or doing recovery perfectly or anything like that. So again, we want to encourage everyone to foster their internal optimist, because it really does go a really long way.
One of the things Meg and I are very passionate about is releasing the stigma behind eating disorders too, and that's again why we want to do all this work to work on our mindset, because then we can talk about it without shame or judgment. Is yeah, we had eating disorders, and now we can help others who have been going through eating disorders as well. There's so many misconceptions and just misinformation about people who develop eating disorders, so releasing the stigma allows us to also like educate people on what is the actual reality of what happens when you develop an eating disorder. Recognizing that we're all in this together, like we are united together as women trying to improve ourselves on a daily basis. And I really think when we can come together, I think that's one of the beautiful aspects of this community, is that's the purpose of this. Like, we're all coming together, we all recognize there's a problem, we're all releasing the stigma and moving forward with our lives and moving forward with recovery.
And remembering that you're not the odd one out here. I think it is, like Victoria's saying, so important to have that community of women around us, and because that's traditional and what women have always had moving through hard times, is that group of people around us who's going to support us and be with us and show us like, hey, you're not the odd one here. Honestly, disordered eating among women is rampant, and so recognizing this and talking about it helps to bring that to light so that we can all move forward as a whole in just repairing ourselves internally and just society in general, and how we can just all move past this and recognize that food and weight are holding us all back from really our true potential.
So step 5 is seeking help and getting help with what you personally need. So huge disclaimer here that Meg and I want to say is we cannot tell you what you're going to personally need. You're going to have to be honest with yourself and talk to trusted people around you, friends or family, to know what you personally going to need, because everyone needs different support, and that is not going to be able to be provided within the community, because that's something a one-on-one support is going to need to provide you. So when you're being honest with yourself, know where you are in your process. So some people are going to need to see a dietitian, maybe like in our practice with Nourishing Minds Nutrition, we work with a lot of people who are in the tail end of their recovery from an eating disorder, orthorexia, and disordered eating. Maybe you need a therapist, maybe you need a dietitian therapist, a doctor, maybe you want to work with energy healers, maybe you want to kind of seek all the different aspects. You have to know where you're at in your journey and what's going to best serve you.
Or maybe you're just in the stage of your journey where you're at the very tail end, or maybe you were a slight disordered eater, or regardless, maybe you just need to be immersed in the steps of intuitive eating and instinctual living so that you can fully kind of cross the road, if a bigger speech that I just made up, to that other side where it is complete food freedom and you're reunited with your female intuition once again.
So again, this is where we really want to encourage you to journal and be honest with yourself, allow yourself to feel the emotions, and know what you're personally need for you to bring this amazing recovery aspect to your life.
All right, and step number 6 is recognizing that recovery and this process to intuitive eating is not just a linear process. Honestly, there's ebbs and flows. It can be a slow process. So making sure that you go into this or continue this journey recognizing that, and not beating yourself up for not going fast enough or not being good enough at this, because I think a lot of us can get caught up in that perfectionist.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's such a perfectionist tendency or controlling tendency to want to then perfect recovery, and that's not gonna serve any of us.
That's just not the reality of it, honestly. And in a lot of recovery, it's learning how to let go of the things and learning how to be more, honestly, like more go with the flow and more just accepting that whatever happens, happens. And so this is something that we can really apply to our recovery once we learn that trait, but also to the rest of our life. Not that everything should be laissez-faire or anything, but
yeah, I think that's such a wonderful aspect though of healing. That's something we always say to our clients in Nourishing Minds Nutrition is, imagine if you can learn how to let go and stop controlling in this one place in your life. Imagine where else you can utilize it. And then you really can transform and live this amazing life where you really are embracing your true intuition and living your purpose, but not trying to control it either.
right. And so don't get frustrated with yourself for not being able to take the leap or just like trust the process just all at once. Yeah, it's important to trust the process and take leaps and challenge yourself, but at the same time, remember, there's a book I'm reading that we're probably going to read in our book club that's called Eating in the Light of the Moon, and she uses a lot of metaphors and analogies in there. And one of the things that she mentions is that when you're in disordered eating, it's kind of like you're floating in a lake on a log and you're holding on to the log, okay? So this is comfortable for you, it's a coping mechanism, it's there, it's familiar, and you're safe. But the thing is, shore is so much better and you want to get there, so shore is recovery. And so if you have never swam before, you can't just leave the log and immediately get to the shore. Okay, so you want to leave a little ways and kind of come back, and leave a little ways and kind of come back, building up that strength and that trust and your skills. So in doing that, with the ebbs and flows of recovery, you develop more skills, you develop new coping mechanisms, you learn how to go through life in a way that is serving you and tuning in to your female intuition and just really heightening the awareness of that and your own trust in yourself. And so in that way, I think that analogy is really helpful for people just to kind of visualize and just cut themselves some slack in it all, and just recognizing going in, it's not like, hey, you're leaving the log and you're making a mad sprint to the shore. If it was that easy, I mean, that would be awesome, but the reality is it's not. And so sometimes people can get really frustrated with themselves. Other people can get frustrated with you for having resistance to recovery and not being able to fully embrace it. And again, resistance does not mean you are a weak person. It doesn't mean that you don't want recovery. It just might mean that you need to continue to develop more strength in different areas for you to fully make your way to the other side.
So there you have it. There's the 6 steps that Meg and I recommend to create a mindset that's going to empower you to really, truly recover wherever you are in your journey.